The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking. On the season finale of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show, we're talking Fantasy Baseball Championship and, of course, Major League Baseball playoffs. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show.
Play ball!
Welcome in to the season finale of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show, presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com and Righteous Felon Jerky. I'm your host, Vince Stover. I am joined, as I have been all season long, with I think maybe the exception of one episode, or if not, no, I think every episode this year at some point or another, the senior fantasy Belly Up Fantasy Baseball writer, the one and only Kevin Wilson. Hey, Kev, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and you had it correct that you and I have been here every single week. There's been a couple of occasions where I had to shuffle in a little behind the schedule, but we've been here.
We've been here
it's appropriate that we're here today also.
That's right. So February, we started episode 1 of the season, talked all through the preseason rankings and every predictions, all that good stuff. And now here we are, the final day of Major League Baseball's regular season and the final day of fantasy baseball for the year. And so as I was saying that, I was thinking, no, wait a second. Every time Kevin had to work, he came on. Once we brought you on a little later, and then twice we just started the show a little later, and that I can remember at least. And so, yeah, we made the whole season. We are the Cal Ripken Jr. of fantasy baseball, right?
You need somebody in a pinch? Here we are.
That's right, but don't pinch me. Okay. Yeah, what a season it's been. We're gonna start with some fantasy stuff, and then we'll get into we'll have a guest today. The champion of our fantasy baseball league is going to join us. And then after that is done, we will talk Major League Baseball playoffs and what is ahead, and what we think about how the season concluded and all that good stuff as well. But the fantasy baseball season, I wanted to talk briefly about some guys, mainly on one team, that I think disappointed pretty much all season long, although the numbers could argue Juan Soto did not, but I think we would all agree that the San Diego Padres, fantasy-wise, well, and in real life, but let's focus on the fantasy aspect of it. I think they were a huge disappointment this year.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. I expected much more out of the Padres, especially after they took down the Dodgers in the playoffs. They had all the momentum. They were relatively healthy. And like some of the other teams that we could discuss that were disappointing, they had relatively good health. They had relatively good starting pitching, and they had all-stars at practically every position.
Right.
And you mentioned Juan Soto. If you look at his final numbers, they certainly look respectable. But to me, there's a lot of emptiness there. Yeah. And so stats don't always tell you everything. And there's like I mentioned a couple of times where he said, hey, we're not focused as a team and all that. Yeah. But he said it in like August.
Yeah.
And they're like, dude, where were you back in June?
Right.
When things first started falling apart, before you were 27 and a half games out of first or whatever. And so people are probably happy that they had Juan Soto, but I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
And it was just empty is the word that I can't help but come to when it comes to Juan Soto.
I would argue the one guy who didn't disappoint was Fernando Tatis. He was suspended to start the season, came on in our league. He had a total of 351 points, 25 home runs, 29 steals. He did strike out more than anyone other than Trent Grisham on the Padres in this shorter amount of time. But that being said, I thought Tatis, when he came back, I didn't know what to expect from him.
No, nobody could have. Anybody said that they did, you're a liar. Okay.
Yeah. Fair.
And there were people that went ahead and they took him,
Yeah.
which I can see them doing that. And he provided, as you mentioned, pretty decent numbers after he actually was on the team.
Yeah.
And he did it certainly faster than Bryce Harper.
Yep.
Who came back and was really slow for a long time until he started to pick it up towards the end of the season. But so if you had him, you had to be pretty pleased with his final numbers, except for those strikeouts, as you mentioned, because in a points league, strikeouts they're not good.
Right. Pitching wise, almost the same thing. Blake Snell had a really solid season.
He did. He's in the running for the NL Cy Young Award.
Right. Yeah. 180 innings pitched. That's solid. He has 14-9
like
record.
280 innings in today's baseball.
Right. 20 quality starts on the year, 234 strikeouts. He was solid. After that, though, I give Hader enough credit. I think that he did enough to be still fantasy relevant. But the pitching
they didn't give him enough save opportunities. That was
right. The pitching staff, the injury of Joe Musgrove didn't help, but Musgrove came in highly regarded as a fantasy player this year. Then, like I said, he couldn't stay healthy. And outside of that, the pitching staff just did not do what they needed to do this year, which hurt not only the Padres and their chances for the playoffs, but it hurt fantasy owners everywhere, really coming in expecting big things out of this Padres team.
It did. And everybody had reason to expect big things out of this team. And I just happened to be fortunate that none of them wound up on my fantasy team, not because I was avoiding them, but just because that's the way things worked out.
Yeah. Pitching wise, as a whole in fantasy baseball, the names at the top are names you expected to see for the most part. Burns was not as high up as we thought he would be. He was still in the top tier of pitchers. Nola, same thing, not as high up as we thought he would be. But really, the first surprise I feel like we come across in the pitching stats, you could argue Logan Webb, I guess, in San Francisco. He was up there in the top solid. But Justin Steele from Chicago, he was a guy that floated around the waiver wires at the beginning of the season, and he ends just shy of 500 points. A phenomenal year for him.
Phenomenal year, unfortunately for him and the Cubs. Right? Because they at one time we had like an 80% chance of making the postseason.
Yeah.
But nobody knew they were going to lose like 20 out of their last 23 games or whatever the number is. And they just simply collapsed. And that was in every aspect of the game. Justin Steele, he collapsed a little bit. And the Cubs offense, they collapsed. Their bullpen collapsed. You know, we've got they had big leads, and the bullpen coughed it up. And so Cubs, we both thought, I think, the Cubs would make the postseason, but they did not. And they probably took you pretty far if you had them in fantasy. And hopefully you started to see, hey, this is not working. So you might have jettisoned some of those guys, and maybe it helped you.
Yeah, offensively, it was the names we anticipated overall at the top. Of course, Acuna had a great year. Betts giving the position availability that he had was a huge storyline for us all season as well. But shout out to Corbin Carroll. The rookie comes in. He's a top 10 fantasy offensive player this year, 465 points in our league. 54 stolen bases is what really carried him through.
So, you know,
yeah,
if you were looking for steals in Cats leagues, especially, steals are hard to come by. Easier this year,
right?
In time past, but if you happen to get him, then you're in good shape.
Including Shohei Ohtani, Corbin Carroll is the 10th highest scorer on the offensive side of baseball for fantasy in our points setup. He was drafted 110th overall in the league. So that's a pretty big deal to get a guy that's going to be a top 10 scorer at 110 in the draft. Bobby Witt Jr. had a stellar year this year as well. He really started team
pretty slow, though, if you remember.
He did, yeah.
There were a lot of guys who were like, man, should I drop him? Hopefully you resisted that. And because, he did come on, he got power. He's got speed, and he had eligibility at short and third. I don't think he's going to carry that forward, but for at least for this year, he brought it off for you at a thin position at third base.
Yes, he did. And he was an important part of winning the championship this year in our league as well. That brings us to our segment we like to call the Call to the Pin. Our Call to the Pin segment is presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. If you want the purest jerky in the game, you got to go straight to the source. And Righteous Felon has partnered with the best natural black Angus beef producers in the land to lock up supply and guarantee the best tasting, best textured, and freshest beef jerky on the market. Visit righteousfelon.com. Use that code BELLYUP. It's going to get you 15% off your purchases. Before we bring on our guests, I want to show you a couple things real quick. I tried a new flavor this week of Righteous Felon Jerky. This is the Nelsa Mandilla black pepper and dill pickle mixture. It's a biltong beef jerky. And very solid. It was better than I was expecting it to be. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely not my least.
I'm all down with the black pepper, and I'm all down with the dill pickle. I would be a little hesitant to combine those two, but if you're saying they brought on the power, then that might be something worth checking out.
I think it was solid. Then I also tried 2 new beef sticks. I had the OG Hickory, which I tried the jerky before, and it's very similar, very good. The beef sticks are phenomenal, by the way. This one is called the Fiery Habanero from Righteous Felon.
Oh, no.
It is
you would have to rush me to the hospital if I was eating that. So
spicy and smoky beef stick. Kevin, this one kicks. This one kicks, and I had it.
Kick me. Yeah, like I said, you'd have to have me strapped into the ambulance after I ate something like that.
I ate that one about 30 minutes before leaving for dinner for my wife's birthday, and yes, it was very good, but it kicked, and it kicked my tail.
That's
exit
something I could introduce to my system. I have no gallbladder.
Oh, okay.
So, and so spicy and me don't go together.
Speaking of kicking tails, let's bring on our guest now, our Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball League champion, the one and only Chase Thornton. Chase, congratulations, man. Welcome. Hey, that's all we got time for. Have a good one, Chase. All right, so that was Chase Thornton.
Yeah. I kind of half expected that. But.
Chase, welcome, man. First year playing fantasy baseball, and I want to give you props. I said this earlier when we first came on, but I want to give you props because you didn't just come in and play fantasy baseball. You dove head into it. You were very strategic in how you played. And I'd like to think I made you sweat it out a little bit, but at the end of the day, you come out on top.
No, listen, it was kind of warm up here in the Great North Woods. We were actually doing some work outside around the house today, my wife, and between that and then, sweating out this victory that you guys, I think, thought was a lot more secure than I thought was. I got my industrial size water here. I'm hydrating tonight because I was sweating that out. I was lucky enough to jump out to a big lead. Had a great first week, had 500 some points after the first week.
Yep.
I figured it would take about 900 points or so to win the championship based on the way that you and I had both been scoring over the last month and a half, 2 months. And based on the fact I knew we'd be both making moves. It was kind of funny. Every time I looked at my phone today, I had another, there was a
I couldn't
transaction message coming from our league, and I was like, you and I both were working
at fantasy football, and the sports stove wouldn't get out of the way. So
we both have made about 20 moves, I think, since 6 or 7 o'clock last night.
Yeah,
and honestly, we both just about pulled all the right strings in terms of you literally got everybody. It was in your lineup. Every single pitcher you had and every single position player played for you today, including the relievers you picked up, which is phenomenal. That doesn't always happen. I kept 3 relievers. I picked up Aroldis Chapman, hoping that the Rangers would be in position to have to sweat out a win. I looked at it about Wednesday, and I was up by something like 120 something, 130 points. And it seemed like a pretty secure win. But I when you think of it that way, but then I looked at it, and I was like, he's only got to make up like 26 points a day to catch me. And sure enough, hey, 880 to 864. I don't know if he gave the final score to everybody, but 16 points. We just about
is what we talked about.
Deadlocked.
And I mentioned to Vince, because I went ahead and I picked up Brandon Drury after you guys did not do that. And he had 16 fantasy points alone today. So if he'd picked him up, might be talking a different scenario right now.
Really can't fault just about any move you made.
No. And just like, in the first round where Vince and I went head to head and he was up big early on, and you could have said, well, we'll just coast to this thing. But I kept the pedal on him, and he made moves that he needed to make. And so it was a very similar scenario. And in that I didn't catch him either, but I made him sweat down the stretch.
I did an extra strategic move against Chase. I messaged Chase on Thursday, I think it was, maybe Friday, about coming on the show. And what I did was I said, I want you to come on and talk about your big win. And I was hoping to soften him up a little bit, to make him think it's in the bag. I don't have to work as hard. I can just kind of finish this out. Now, you did comment. I don't know if it's that safe, but I was trying to butter you up to make you lose a little focus here at the end. It did not work. The Philadelphia pitcher that you ran today is what won you the championship.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I had seen that they were going to use Nelson as a bulk guy, as a bulk reliever after they used the starter, and I had actually used that same move with Pepiot from the Dodgers here the last 2 weeks or so. They've been doing that same thing with him. Their pitching staff's been a mess here down the stretch anyway, and they've been doing that every 5 days. They've been running him out there. And so I kept him specifically too for today, knowing that and thinking too, it's a way for him, at least with him, it was a way to get starter points this week without having to use up a starter slot.
Yep.
And we both ran ourselves dry on those, obviously coming, today too, we both ran way over, which is what you got to do. If it's available to you, you got to do it.
Yep.
But yeah, picking him up ended up being a real nice haul for me. Had this come down to the last couple of points here, and you might have snuck it out by a batter or so, I probably would have been kicking myself hard. I did miss putting Tariq Skubal, who had been big for me over the last month. I missed putting him in my lineup on Wednesday, I believe it was, when he had 18 points in a game, and couple of those, couple of things either way, man. A loss by a guy on my side and a win on your side, whatever. Would have turned it. It was a real close game, and it made it fun to follow.
Right. I told Kevin before we came on the air. So I had Merrill Kelly pitch yesterday, and I put him on my bench, and I did that on purpose. One was he was playing Houston, and I had more confidence in Houston than I did Arizona. Kelly actually pitched a decent game. But my other fear is because of all the weird starting situations with teams that had clinched, I was afraid one of my relievers was going to end up starting a game, and then I would have hit my max and wouldn't have been able to pitch today. And so the safest move I thought was put Kelly on the bench. He scored 14, which still wouldn't have won it for me. But I was going to kick myself if I lost by 14 or 13 and had the chance to win it. But last year I miscounted. I think that's what happened. I think someone started. I didn't anticipate starting the night before the final day. And then I could not run my starters out there the next day and lost the championship. And I didn't want to do that again. So it just hopefully gives a little insight to people of the mindset of what's going on in these championship games. You got to use every rule to your advantage. You got to
be aware of your surroundings.
You got to be paying attention like hour to hour.
You do.
Yeah.
And,
like today, coming into today, we had no idea who was going to start for the Angels. I had picked up Reed Detmers just in case. They didn't really announce for forever, and none of the sites even had it listed for a while.
Yeah. No, it's TBD for the longest.
Yeah, but the thing is like, and it's the same thing if you're in a football league that does their championship in week 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just said, we didn't get it this year where we had the crazy last day and people clinching, and we're switching back and forth on MLB Network or whatever, following games that they're coming down to the wire. There was still seeding to be determined, but everybody clinched, Friday night. It was like, oh, okay, well, great. But because that's the case, yeah. Aaron Judge, who I was missing for a good portion of the season anyway with his injuries, he didn't play today, so I didn't have the heart to drop him. I just moved him to my bench. I was like, I can't drop Aaron Judge on championship day. But not knowing who's going to play, who's going to be starting, and not having that certainty in the pitching staff means that you really do have to be paying attention, especially the last week here.
That's right.
If you're in the championship. That's something I guess I learned about it. It was really having to pay attention there.
That brings up a question I want to throw out to you guys, both of you, because there's something that I've seen on out there in the social universe talking about how, well, if you're playing today, this last week in fantasy baseball, then you probably don't know what you're doing because of the exact reason, Chase, you just laid out, that people are, clinching and they're not playing. You don't know if they're going to play or not. But I think that adds a level of, intrigue to the whole thing. The last couple of days, as you guys have mentioned, you had to make moves.
Big time.
Do I do that or not?
Because that's the strategy. That's the skill and the strategy involved there is making those kinds of calls. Like if it was just as easy as, following rankings and running the best dudes out there, great. Yeah. We all could do it. We all could turn our computers off after draft day.
That's right. Anybody could do this. So my question is, do you both think that playing till the very end of the season is the way to go in fantasy baseball, or is there some adjustment that we might want to look at?
So I would have argued before this year, we need to end a week early. That being said, I think my eyes were open a little bit more this year to, I think it's good because it does. Now, this isn't a non-keeper league. If you're in a dynasty league or a keeper league, I think you need to go earlier and end a week early. But in just a standard league, I think going to the end is important. I had batters going today that would have not touched my roster at any point this season, but they were playing, and Manny Machado was not, who I picked up this week when Kevin dropped him. And those guys, I mean, I loaded with Minnesota Twins.
Twins in Colorado. Exactly.
Yeah, Twins in Colorado.
Right.
So I had 3 Twins batting today. Now I got -2 on one of them, but nonetheless, I think that strategy and that effort, and that also has to tie into it being a close matchup. If it's a blowout, then it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But no, I liked it in the way that we did it, and fighting all the way through the last day.
If we had ended last week, like I just said, this 100+ point blowout,
right?
It came down to the last game, and it literally came down to the last 2 or 3 games that were active today.
Right.
Even I know everybody started at the same time, but there were 2-3. The last 2-3 games came down to the bottom of the 9th and the 10th and 11th innings, and we literally had guys that were still alive. And it came down to that precisely because we played. Now, I agree with you on the dynasty thing. You can't be dropping guys off your dynasty rosters just to try and stick in a couple of backup Minnesota Twins guys in the infield so you can have guys batting when the Phillies are resting guys or whatever. But no, I don't like it in football going through week 18 necessarily.
Agreed.
But in baseball, I agree with you. If you're in a redraft league, going right up to this day, I mean, I think it brought out the strategy in both of us, and we actually had to play the game.
Well, in football too, you're talking about key contributors all year long not playing. In baseball, we still had 2 weeks to play these guys, and it wasn't until the last 2 days that you started having the pitchers not pitching.
And now that there's 3 wild cards, this is going to be the standard in baseball.
Yeah,
that series are going to come down to the last weekend of the season. Who, if the Rangers scored 2 runs today, they win the AL West.
Right.
They did not.
And that's a team that you would have thought you could have banked on 2 runs.
That's a team that could score 12 runs on you.
Right.
But,
No, I completely agree. I liked running it up to the end, even like I said, even though I'm a little dehydrated right now from sweating it out. I had to change my shirt a couple times.
And especially in football, because you could pretty much, after somebody wins the division or whatever, or whatever it is, for a week, you can plan about who's not going to play.
Right. True.
Or whatever. So, but in baseball, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You don't know who's going to, they're not going to leave them guys off the roster, especially now because you can only put 28 guys on a roster September 1st or after. You used to be able to put 40.
Right.
So they got to play their guys.
I have 15 guys on my roster right now that were not on my roster Wednesday.
Right.
And you can do that in this setting. Now I wouldn't have done this in a normal matchup, obviously.
No,
but
you also got good contributions from two guys that I drafted. Michael Harris and Jose Abreu were two draft picks of mine that I dropped through the year for when Harris was injured, and then Abreu when he was miserable.
When he stunk up the joint, you could say it.
Yeah, well, Harris did too for a while. And this is where me and Kevin are the biggest difference in our games. Is in the regular season, I am more than happy to be patient with the guys who are supposed to be good.
Right.
And I will lose some regular season matchups because I'm being patient. Now, as it gets tighter where I know I've got to make the playoffs, I'll start to lose that patience. But so far in this league especially, I've been able to make the playoffs. And so I'm patient, very, very patient with guys. Kevin, and he has succeeded in doing this. Obviously, he's been the number one team and every year we've had this league. His meter of willing to be patient with someone is very slim. Now, if it's the guy,
you're not dropping Mookie because he had a 4-game slump or a week long drought. Yeah,
but anybody that's drafted in the third round,
I ran with Manny Machado as long as I could possibly run with them, and then I said, "The heck with this guy," and I drop him. You pick him up, and what does he do? He hits 2 home runs the very first day he's on your roster. So you're like, you just can't win sometimes.
I was trying to be patient with guys. I ended up finally having to drop Sean Murphy after he'd been so good for me most of the year. But we got to playoff time here, and they were resting him, and he was only catching, it seemed like, every 2-3 days or so. And I was trying to be patient with guys, but there were a couple guys I had to cut loose, and I'm glad I was patient and hung on. I mean, I got good contributions out of Bobby Witt. I got great contributions out of him and Kyle Tucker and Stephen Kwan. And I was lucky. I was able to pick up Kyle Schwarber. I kept him most of the year after he was dropped. Some of my biggest contributors like that but I was patient with Pete Alonso for a while. And then Pete Alonso'd his way to glory. I definitely learned a lot. And honestly, I learned a lot from the two of you, watching, listening, reading your work and that kind of thing, because I wasn't sure baseball wise
to ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
That's what your dad has said as well. I listened to you guys, and next thing you know, you're playing him, and then you lose by 28 points because he listened to you. So that's the risk you take here. So.
Now, Chase, you're a Wisconsin guy. Adrian Hauser gave you 20 points today. Another reason why you won. You won by 16. So if you don't have Adrian Hauser run out there, you may not get that win. Me and Kevin are getting ready to talk about the Major League Baseball playoffs, but speak about the contribution from a guy from a team that you like, and kind of how that leads up.
How much better does that make it? You had mentioned, I think you had mentioned when I drafted Contreras during the draft, and I was off air at the time, but I was following and watching, and you had said, "Well, Chase, there you go. There's your Brewer," and it makes it so much nicer when you've got some of those guys to contribute. And here in the last couple of weeks, I hung on to Contreras most of the year. I did have him off my roster for a little bit, picked him back up, but having Mark Canha here, who has exploded since the Brewers picked him up, was such a great.
You're welcome on that one too, as well, Chase, because I'm the one that wrote about him.
But and then like you said, having Hauser come through so big for me today, on a day that they didn't really have to worry about too much, but came out of it with a 4-0 win. It's nice because the guy that lives 2 doors down from me is a guy that hangs the W every time the Cubs win, and I have an L flag that might show up outside his porch here tonight after he goes to sleep. So. But anyway, I mean, it makes it more. It's the same way in football. Right. The thing is you've got to understand, and it is fantasy football, fantasy basketball, fantasy NASCAR, golf. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to separate your fandom from what you're doing and understand when a guy is or isn't worth it. Now, we were lucky this year. I mean, you had Christian Yelich for a lot of the year, and
he had. And I picked him up. I thought maybe your Manny Machado move was a retaliation for me picking up Christian.
But
Yelich.
It paid off. It paid off for you because he actually produced this year, and it was so wonderful as a Brewer fan to see that.
Yeah.
But it's you have to understand when those guys aren't. I had Rowdy Tellez for a while, had to cut bait on him, not just because of the injury time he missed, but he just wasn't producing to the level that I needed. And there were guys on the bench, on the waiver wire I could grab on top of that. And yeah, if you got to pick up a Cub, you got to pick up a Cub once in a while if they warrant it.
As Pat,
but it does make it a lot more fun to know that, that I got that kind of production out of a guy that it was just a last minute pickup kind of thing, but B, it was for the team that I actually wanted to see win today as well. And
definitely.
It was nice.
And I was thinking, I don't know. I've had several Brewers on the roster throughout the year.
One guy that we can bring up specifically is Brandon Woodruff.
Yeah.
Because this is what he did, right? 28, 20, 29, 33, 21. And when you really needed him to step up, he gave you 9.
But are you here if you're, right. On the one hand,
but
getting that kind of contribution from him over the last 2 months.
You can make the moves that make sense and is the right moves, and they still don't work.
Right.
So,
yeah.
That's just the way it goes.
I was able to have on my roster at one point or another during this championship matchup, Adames, who I've had all year, Woody, who I've had all year. And I didn't plan on drafting Woodruff. I was actually down on him coming into the year. I was worried about injury stuff and whatever.
Right.
But he was there at the right time, so I took him, and it paid off. Sal Frelick, who, Kevin, I talked to you about 2 weeks before he was called up. I said, we got to pay attention to this kid and see what happened. Wade Miley, who we brought up several times throughout the season, the stuff that he did this year. And another guy that, even as a Brewer fan, I was like, oh, man, Wade Miley, like, why are we bringing him back? Like,
but he was always available, and he's always getting you double-digit points. It was like, hey, great.
Yeah.
And you could feel okay dropping him because you knew he was going to be there next week when you wanted him because nobody else was grabbing him too.
My favorite pickup for myself in this championship matchup, it did not get me the win. Former Brewer Brent Suter started for Colorado today.
Yeah.
I had the original starting pitcher that something happened to him. We don't know what yet. They pulled him from the start, and I was looking for long relievers in Colorado to see who'd pitch, and they said Suter was going to start. And I said, oh man, I can't turn that down. So pick up Brent Suter. He threw up 4 points today in 10 pitches. He only pitched the first inning. He got a strikeout, 10 pitches. But it was fun. That's what I like. I like looking at those kinds of things and say, hey, it's cool. I like Brent Suter. I cheered for Brent Suter for many, many years, and to have him there in the end, and
has always seemed like a good guy. And he was a guy that towards the end of his time with us, he didn't necessarily produce, but he had been such a steady presence.
Yeah.
Good guy. And then, like you said, fun to pick him up on a whim here. And hey, he contributed and you got damn close. So there it is.
So Chase, here's my question for you. Who is the individual player that you had on your fantasy baseball team this year that maybe you didn't know a ton about, never followed or necessarily cared about, but after this year, you're kind of now locked into following this guy the rest of his career? Do you have
Kyle Tucker?
Okay, Kyle Tucker.
Kyle Tucker. Yeah. Like I said, coming into this, I thought I knew baseball pretty well, and and who's okay and who's not. But I got 500 points from Kyle Tucker this season, and the dude he's a machine, just on base all the time and ripping it for you. And I didn't know a ton about him coming in. I didn't know that he was going to be as good as he was. Obviously, nobody knows until they are. But Kyle Tucker, Bobby Witt, I had again on my list all year, and he had a phenomenal year. But Kyle Tucker's probably the one guy on my entire team that I probably learned the most about, and I kind of like, even though he's an Astro, and I'm not big on that, might be a little bit of a fan of him. Yeah,
I'm wearing this specifically because they won a division.
Okay,
there you go.
Now, here's my other question, Chase. Anyone who's done fantasy football, so you know this from fantasy football, but same is true for fantasy baseball. There's a guy that burns you, and you're like, I will never draft that guy again. He will
See, that's
never
where I
see
was
my
gonna go as
roster
well,
again.
Vince.
I
So
don't
I'm
care
interested
who
in
he
this
is.
answer.
I don't care how high he's ranked. This guy will not ever touch my roster. Do you have anybody that I didn't give you fair warning? I was going to ask these questions, but is there anybody that you can think of that you just say, you know what, I'm done with that dude? Like for me, Jazz Chisholm, he'll never touch my roster,
Right.
never.
Right.
And it's nothing against him personally, of course. It's just you get burned by some people, and you're
That's
like,
right.
what ain't happening?
Yeah,
So
and then
people are like
sometimes you don't learn, and you keep drafting them. That they become the Dwayne Bowe of your roster, of your life. I think I had that dude every year, and I was like, it's going to be his year. It's going to be his year. And then he was on the team the year that they had like 2 touchdowns to wide receivers, and he wasn't it. I don't know if I'm completely out on anybody. I was about ready to fly. Speaking of Astros, I was about ready to fly down to Houston and kick Jose Abreu. I would have needed a stepladder to do it, but I would have liked to kick him in the tail partway through the season.
Well,
he ended up coming on.
I had him. I think Vince, you have him too.
He's on my roster today. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And the industry was not happy with him for a while.
All three of us had reason to cut him at some point because he was awful. He was simply awful, much more awful than I would have thought. Because he's been very
turned it on late and actually made a run of it. But
yeah, he did.
He was frustrating with me for a while.
Absolutely gruesome, especially at the All-Star game break.
Right.
Yeah.
But so he's a player. You mentioned a player. You're not. I'm out on him. He's like 48 years old now, or whatever it is. So I will not be.
Every fantasy football draft and every fantasy baseball draft, I start my year by clicking the button that says move this person off my draft list. And I'll take about 3 guys and just get them out of the way. I don't even want to see them.
So you don't even have to worry. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll see them on that list.
Basically say if Vince next year you want Manny Machado, you go ahead and do that.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping more people get burned by people and say, you know what, I ain't even touching that. And then you start picking them up in the 3rd round versus the 1st round. And if they do succeed, you win. If they don't, then you learn the same lesson the guy learned the year before, and it is what it is. Chase, man, congrats. I mean, you win. And, I don't know what you win, man. Pride. I want to talk to Mike. Mike was talking about prizes, but I don't know that we ever came up with prizes for this league. I don't know that Mike.
There ought to be a trophy.
Yeah, a travel.
At the very least.
I'll just clip the last 20 minutes of conversation.
A trophy one way or another.
Well, I'll clip the last 20 minutes of conversation. I'll run that on a loop here in the basement.
We need to figure that out. Maybe a traveling trophy that we can send and put a name on and get it around. My boss brought in his fantasy football trophy to show off during our fantasy football draft at work. That's not from our league. It's from a different league, but he won, so he wanted to show it off. So
I've got a fantasy football trophy I'm looking at right now. So you could be real sure there would be a fantasy baseball trophy over there if I had.
Oh yeah, I've already told my wife. Yeah, like there's a couple of my home leagues. I'm like, when I win those, they will be in a prominent spot in the living room. They will not be. I don't even know that they'll make it down here to the basement where I live and do this stuff. They're going to be prominently displayed in the living room. But no, I really appreciate you having me in the league. It was fun. It was a great learning experience. A lot of fun. I'm looking forward to doing more in the future, but it was a good time, not just because I won. Yeah. But like I said, it was fun learning about it and getting to see and experience a different side of baseball. Mm-hmm. Being a baseball fan, this allowed me to look at it from a completely different angle, but then also being a fantasy guy myself, seeing a different side of the fantasy world because I had not played fantasy baseball before and seeing the differences. And it was a great time. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. And we're glad that you came on. Now, Chase, of course, he does a lot of fantasy stuff for Belly Up Sports, bellyupfantasysports.com. And so Chase, tell the fine folks where people can catch you at and catch your work.
Actually, you can find me a little bit later tonight on MD's Fantasy Football Show. Dan Mader and I will be breaking down the day in fantasy football. And you can find me there Wednesday night as well for Operation Domination on MD's Fantasy Football Show, where we'll be previewing Week 5. You can always find me Sunday mornings with Kevin on the Belly Up Fantasy Live show there. We breaking down and walking into the into the games for the week.
That's right. And Chase, you and I might need to smooth talk, Mike a little bit, because we were like, oh, he doesn't have any wins, and he went ahead and just blew our everyone doors off. So.
He had Lamar Jackson and AJ Brown that just went off for him today. He had a couple of guys that just went absolutely, on us. But yeah. And we had Jamar Chase and Drake London, and they hurt. But no, we'll figure it out. We'll get it figured out. But and then you can always find me, STT Chase FFB, on the Twitter machine or X or whatever we call it, and check out my rankings and other work over at bellyupfantasysports.com.
Well, make sure Dan introduces you tonight as the Sports Show Belly Up Fantasy
Make sure you,
Baseball champion.
Definitely message him before the show starts, so he knows what the proper introduction should be.
You're now a champion in the industry. So, Chase, again, man, we appreciate you. Congrats, first year. We call it beginner's luck. We'll see what happens next year. And as badly as it hurts,
you're marked going forward. So
that's
just
right.
Be ready for that.
And last year, Dan D'Amico was the champion. This year, he finishes 7th place in the league. So, we'll try to humble you next year. But Chase, we do appreciate you, man, and congrats again. We'll see if we get someone to send you something. All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
All right. He's Chase Thornton, BellyUpFantasySports.com, and the Belly Up Sports Network as well. And we do appreciate him. Real quick, Kevin, here's how it broke down. Chase won the league. I was in 2nd. Kevin was in 3rd. My dad, who started off so hot to begin the year, he ends in 4th. Let's see here. Nick Macaronis in 5th place. Mike Brown, co-owner of Belly Up, 6th place. Dan D'Amico, reigning champ. He is now the 7th place, reigning 7th placer in the league. Brendan Myers ends in 8th. Then Drew Childs, 9th, and Nathan Nguyen. And listen, I love Nathan Nguyen. I really do. He's a great kid. He does a great show. I
like reading his stuff. I like, when he does his shows or whatever, and he's very entertaining. Yeah. But, he needs to stay away from fantasy baseball.
He is an Oakland A's fan. If that says anything,
that indicates an issue right off the bat. So.
He ends the year 2-19. But we appreciate all the guys who jumped in and helped and were a part of the league this year. Because without it, we would be talking about leagues that, variety of leagues. This allows us to talk about one league all year long and helps with that. So that is that. And again, we want to thank Righteous Felon for their support of the program and their help as well. Let's transition now to real baseball. The season is done. There's actually one game left, but it has no impact on anything, seeding or anything like that. There was a delayed game today. The Mets and the Phillies. I think Mets and the Marlins. But it does not affect the seeding. The seeding is set, and so everything is good to go. ABC is going to carry the Rangers-Rays series, and their first game is Tuesday at 3:00 in the afternoon. So
3:00 where time begins, 2:00 local. And I don't know who they expect supposed to be able to watch baseball at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Well, I mean, you got to figure out how many sick days you got. You got to figure it out, right?
That's something right there that's really going to work against the Rangers.
Yeah,
for a couple of reasons. One, they're going up against the Rays, which is not something you want to do. And now they've got no home games in the first round.
So
none.
It's a 3-game series, but it's all
whoever wins 2,
all in the top
all in
seed.
Tampa, all of them.
Yeah, all the games are in the top
as
seed.
of last year, and that didn't stop. The Phillies and the Padres and stuff like that winning. I can't. I'm a Ranger guy. All I have to do is drive up the freeway to get to their stadium. But now there's no, and they've been talking about postseason tickets and everything else for a long time. Well, if they don't beat the Rays, there are no postseason home games for the Rangers.
True.
That's all they had to do is score 2 runs today, and this would not be an issue. They would be the AL West champions and have home games. But it didn't happen. And they have a first-round bye on top of it all.
Right. True.
Didn't happen at all. This couldn't have gone worse, I don't think, for the Rangers. They wind up with the Rays, and the Rays they had lost 3 all-star grade pitchers in my mind, but they still won. it's got in the playoffs.
Yep.
And Tyler Glasgow.
Well, Texas did the
guys
same
like
thing
that.
though, Kev. Right? I mean, they've both. I think this is a perfect series because they both have the same issues. They both have scored a lot of runs.
Right.
They both have had surprisingly good pitching this year, and they both have been absolutely demolished by injuries from their aces, from their top pitchers. And so I think
the pitchers that are left, I think, favor the Rays. Like I said,
I would agree.
Tyler Glasgow.
Yeah.
At just off the top of my head.
Yep.
And Nathan Eovaldi pitched. He has not pitched well since he came off the injury list. And Montgomery has looked good, but Montgomery's not the guy you want to be your number one starter.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true.
I think that's a real issue for the Rangers now, because now that they're playing on Tuesday, they can't structure their rotation the way they would have wanted to do it. Now it's just whoever's left over.
Right. Yeah, or you're rushing guys in to try to get, and that's what they do in the playoffs, right? They'll go guys on short rest, but that's something most of the time comes back to bite you when you do that. You almost just have to trust what you have, and instead of rushing a guy back, you save them and hope you make it to the next round, kind of a deal. Right. Let's talk about these matchups real quick. Minnesota, the 3 seed, is going against Toronto. Toronto has underperformed all year long, but they have the talent to make a run.
They have the talent. They have Kevin Gossman at the top of their rotation.
Yep.
They've got the offense. And what Minnesota has going for them are 2 things. 1, they're at home. And 2, they're not playing the Yankees. So they've got that. Because every time that they've made the playoffs, the Yankees have pushed them aside rather easily.
Fair point.
Down through
how do you see this one breaking down for Toronto and Minnesota?
I'm going to go. I really, really want to go with Toronto, but I think Minnesota's pitching staff has been pretty good this year. They're at home, so I'm going to go with the Twins. I think it might take all 3 games to get that done.
The Twins are running Pablo Lopez out for game 1. Toronto has not yet announced who they're going to start in game 1 of that series. I'm looking real quick to see Tampa runs out. Oh, that's the wrong series. Let's see here. There we go. Sonny Gray.
Just as I mentioned for Tampa, and of course the Rangers don't have an announced starter yet.
Sonny Gray goes in game 2. Game 3 pitchers have not been announced because it's as needed, so they won't announce that till it becomes officially necessary. On that one, I tend to lean with you. My heart just goes Blue Jays. I really feel like they're a team. They've got I'm going to do that. Blue Jays. I'm going to pick the Blue Jays. They have the better record.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah,
Blue Jays are a talented team, and
if that offense wakes up,
they're a problem for any team that they're playing if their offense wakes up.
Yeah,
but,
I go Minnesota in game 1, but then I think Toronto takes the next 2.
Okay, that could easily happen.
Tampa and Texas. I feel like you probably already shown your hand on that one. It seems like you're going Tampa all the way on this one.
Yeah, because we talked right before the season began that going against Tampa is a fool's errand.
Yeah,
and they're an experienced team, of course. Rangers don't have that, even though they do have Corey Seager. If they have any chance in this series, Corey Seager has to lead them because he's, of course, the guy that won the World Series MVP when the Dodgers won it, when it was up the street. And I actually went to that and saw them play in the playoffs that year. But so Corey Seager's going to have a huge series. Otherwise, it's not going to work for
how many runs does Texas have to score per game to beat Tampa? Is 5 the number?
5 at least.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, they got Glasnow at game 1, Eflin game 2 for the Rays.
That's a pretty good 1-2 pitching. Even though they, like we mentioned, they lost just about every starter pitching that they have.
Yeah, in a 5-game series, it changes the outlook for Tampa. In a 3-game series, it seems like they still have the tools.
They do. And so I think that I thought for sure I'd be talking about something different, that the Rangers would be at home and be sitting there as the ALS champions. They are not.
Yeah.
So, they're going to have to be happy making the playoffs this year, and that's it.
Yeah, I think Tampa wins this series. Texas, it took me 2-3 months of the season to finally believe in Texas. And then about 2 months later, I couldn't believe in them as much. And now I'm at that point where I'm going, hey, man, I'm glad they made the playoffs because I think the season they had is deserving of that. But I don't trust them.
And they lost, talk about starters. They've lost Hall of Fame starting level pitching.
Right.
And
which we predicted before the season started.
Right.
Both of us did.
Yeah. You don't have to be hooked into the prophetic airwaves to come up with the fact that Jacob deGrom wasn't going to make it the whole season.
Yeah.
But
let's jump over to the National League. Phillies and Marlins is where we'll start. Okay. Marlins make the playoffs, and I mean they were there at the top.
I didn't believe in them, and I still don't. They made the playoffs because the Cubs collapsed.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves. And because the Marlins, like we talked about it all season, have a negative point differential, run differential. Yeah. And their offense going up against the Phillies, that's bad.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to give them some credit because I know they listen to the show. They play it in the clubhouse every single week. They play our show, and you said they made it in because the Cubs.
I'll take credit. I'll give them some incentive to go out and prove me wrong. So there you go.
You said they made it because the Cubs choked, and they did in part. But listen, they surprised me all season. But when I did my power rankings all year long, I put in there anytime they're in the top 10. I do not believe in this team, and I you said, I still don't. They're going to run Luzardo out against Wheeler on Tuesday, and Luzardo's had games where he's been phenomenal, and he's had games where he hasn't been. It's the second game though.
Alcantara has been
he's been bad
garbage this year.
Yeah, in the second game though, Kevin, they're running Garrett out against Nola. That I would not be excited about if I'm a Miami fan. And actually, I talked to a Miami fan today, and he said, I just hope that we don't have to play the Brewers in the first round. I thought, my goodness, I think I'd be hoping not to play Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that they would have been a better matchup going against Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Than Philadelphia, because Philadelphia, of course, they're familiar with. They're in the same division.
Yep.
And they don't have the offense, certainly. Because you look at this, all right, Philadelphia was plus 73,
right,
in run differential, and Miami was minus 52.
Oof.
That's 100 runs difference almost.
Yeah,
between the two of them.
Yeah,
and we all know the Phillies, and their weakness has been pitching, and so, but I don't think Miami can take advantage of that as much.
I agree.
If it was Arizona, and we changed this matchup a little bit, then I think that might have worked out differently all the way around. But Philly is a dangerous team. I think they win that series easily.
I agree. How about this fun stat? No matter who Milwaukee played in round one, they would go up against someone who Craig Counsell, their manager, won a World Series with. Arizona and Miami. Counsell played on both of those teams, won World Series with both of those teams. The Brewers do end up with the Diamondbacks. And I don't know. I would have more rather played Miami personally, but I also subscribe to the fact that you don't hope to play anybody. You just play who gets there and let the baseball gods decide from there on out. Now, there are not starting pitchers listed yet for Arizona or Milwaukee, even for Tuesday night's game. But I would assume Milwaukee is on rest. Their starting pitchers are on rest. I would assume it's going to be Woody or Burns in game one and the other one in game two. I'm trying to think. I think Burns has had more rest than Woodruff coming in. So I would assume it would be Burns game one, Woodruff game two. And for Arizona, I would think they've had to play up until yesterday's when they clinched. So I would think the Diamondbacks are going to try to run out as fast as they can Zach Gallen. But I'm not sure when he pitched last.
I can tell you that because he is on my fantasy team. Hold on.
Okay, good.
I can give you that information. Let's go. I don't need you to update the stats because there aren't any stats to update. All right. Zach Gallen, last pitched on Friday, going 6 1/3 innings, 2 runs, 7 hits, struck out 7, and walked 1. So,
and Merrill Kelly went Saturday.
Monday, that's not 4 days rest.
Yeah, and Merrill Kelly ran out Saturday. I would guess they're going to run Gallen out. They may save him for game 2, which I think is wise. Again, I think you want him to be at rest. So I don't know who they're going to run out game 1. That's interesting. We'll keep an eye on that. This Arizona team is fun. They've had a really solid year. The young guys have really stepped up. Ketel Marte has been what he was supposed to be this year as well. Tommy Pham came over late in the year and produced for them too. They're a very dangerous team. I try really hard not to be biased, but I'm going to pick the Brewers. I just think they have the better pitching staff, and when it comes to the playoffs, that's how I pick games.
I agree with that. If they had Arizona, had a little more rest, and they were pitching Zach Gallen on regular rest, and then they were pitching Merrill Kelly on regular rest, they could go toe-to-toe with the Brewers. But that does not – and even if they do pitch them on short rest, that's usually not a good prescription in the playoffs.
Right.
Right?
You're right.
And so I think Milwaukee wins that series, and maybe not quite as easily as you probably would hope that they would win that series, but they're going to win that. And then you and me go head to head in the second round, Dodgers, Brewers, and then we'll really get into seeing what's going on right there.
I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. In these first round matchups, Tampa, Texas, Minnesota, Toronto, Milwaukee, Arizona, Philadelphia, Miami. How many of those 4 are sweeps?
Let's see. Okay, so I think Philadelphia sweep. So that's
Agreed.
1. And I think that Texas might get swept. I'm kind of hoping that's not what happens. So I'm going to go 2. 2 of them will be a sweep.
I'll go 2 also. I think it's the National League. I think Milwaukee and Philadelphia can both win the first 2 games. I think Texas's offense is going to keep them in a game and possibly win a game for them. And Minnesota and Toronto, to me, are so evenly matched. Even though they're the 3-6, they're so evenly matched. The only reason Minnesota's a 3 is because they won their division.
They won the division.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be flipped around. Actually, they'd be facing Tampa. If you just did it by record, I believe they'd be the 6th seed facing Tampa, the 4 seed, if I remember. Or no, Toronto. Anyway, no, Texas. It doesn't matter. Either way, I think that one's evenly matched, so I don't think it will be a sweep. No. Then you've got, of course, Baltimore and Houston are the ones with the bye in the AL, Atlanta and LA in the NL. I predicted at the beginning of the year Houston goes to the World Series. I'm going to stick with that, but I sure like these Orioles, and I'll be cheering for them along the way.
The only thing the Orioles don't have working for them is experience.
Yeah.
And they've been able to stick it out. And, of course, Tampa started off with the huge, big 30, and 7 or whatever it was way back in the beginning.
Yep.
But Baltimore stayed right there, and all of a sudden, and the Rays came down, and here comes Baltimore.
Right.
But then, unbelievably enough, here comes Tampa again. But Baltimore was able to keep their composure and beat them back. So,
let's face it, Baltimore is built for the future. I mean, this is a team that's not going away. No,
it is not. They've got young talent in their rotation. They got it, of course, in the field. But don't. They're built for the future, but still don't sleep on Baltimore because they've got the pitching, they got the hitting, they got the defense. They're not going to be an easy out. And Houston, I would feel much more comfortable if they were. Because if you look at it, Houston didn't even have a winning record at home.
Yeah,
that's not good. So, I think
but you also have to look at Houston
get it together all season. But maybe they can throw the switch.
You got to look at Houston though, what they did in the last month more so than what they did at this point. I think all these teams are the same way. I think you got to focus in on the last month of what they looked like versus how they looked all season. That's a little bit more telling of what they're doing right now. Houston is as dangerous as anybody out here. But I do like. I'm actually cheering for Baltimore, even though I've picked Houston to win. In the National League, let's start with Milwaukee and LA if we get there. It was only a few years ago, the Game 7 in the National League Championship Series. Milwaukee looking for a World Series berth. LA snatched it from them and kept them out. If I am fortunate enough to see Milwaukee in the second round, tell me what LA looks like with their pitching staff right now, because that's the area that I look at and go, I think Milwaukee's better pitching.
Absolutely, because you talk about Tampa, but the Dodgers have had that same issue. Guys that have been hurt and all that. And but I think that Clayton Kershaw is going to absolutely flip the script on that middle of the road at best postseason record that he has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he can do it. And it's a 5-game series, that first round.
Right.
So that does not work in Milwaukee's advantage. They're not going to be able to use, because they've got the superior starting rotation, no question in my mind about that.
Yeah.
But only 5-game series, they're not going to be able to utilize that as much. So it's going to be an interesting series. I think Milwaukee can take them. The Dodgers are not, the juggernaut they've been, even though let me see, I'll tell you. Let's see, the Dodgers still won 100 games. They're not dominant and still won 100 games. So, I'm Dodgers
Right.
through and through. I got to go with the Dodgers there, but Milwaukee is a dangerous team. So it's going to be a very interesting series between the two of them.
The problem with Milwaukee has been consistency. They've not consistently scored runs. They've been better pitching than not, but the consistency's been the issue. If they're consistent in the playoffs, they can go to the World Series possibly. But if they continue what they did all year, they're going to struggle.
Right. And talk about the Braves, because the Braves have the same issue really as the Dodgers. Their starting rotation, even though the Braves won 104 games.
Yeah.
And Bryce Elder is not a guy that I really trust. He's a guy I had on my fantasy team, but I dropped him because he wasn't that good. He corrected things a little bit. But if you're sitting there and you're talking about Bryce Elder as the guy you're counting on in the playoffs, that's probably not a great thing. So,
yeah, let me comment on my fantasy owned Bryce Elder in 2 different leagues.
Okay.
Yeah, he hurt you more than he helped you at the end, for sure. And the Braves, excuse me, Strider's awesome. The other guys are just, they can hit, and the pitchers, what I mean by it's bad terminology, the pitchers can pitch. They can, if they hit on the right night, they're going to be really, really good. I think the Braves are clearly the favorites in my opinion.
Absolutely, but the favorite, as we know, doesn't mean you win.
Correct. Acuna's been great. They got offense with Riley, Olson, Albies, Harris, Ozuna, who I think is a scum of the earth. They've got offense, and
I agree.
And they're a good baseball team.
But that's where, because the Dodgers can match them almost in offense.
Yeah.
They've got 4 players that drove in 100 runs on their team.
All right, so here's the storyline I'm cheering for. Milwaukee and Houston. Milwaukee used to be in the AL. Houston used to be in the NL. They flipped the script, and Milwaukee has never won a World Series as the Milwaukee Brewers. Milwaukee did get a World Series many moons ago, but it was with the Braves and not the Brewers. Houston, of course, recent champs. So I'm going to go Milwaukee, Houston. Granted, that is playing favoritism on my Brewers. I think it's probably going to be Atlanta, Houston, but I'm going to pick, for the fun of it, Milwaukee and Houston this year, going to the World Series. And why not? Let's give Milwaukee a ring. I'll predict Milwaukee wins the whole thing.
That's just like the article that came out a couple days ago.
Great article.
We need to cheer for the Brewers, and it was a great article. And I know you saw my comment.
Yeah.
That sorry, it's Dodgers all the way for me.
Yeah.
But great article.
So what's your final prediction?
My final prediction is I'm going to go with Houston as well. in the American League. And I don't want to be a homer, but Dodgers are gonna because remember a couple years ago the Dodgers and Braves played each other. Braves knocked them out.
Yep.
And they're going to return and give some revenge on that. So Dodgers, Houston in the World Series, and Dodgers are your World Series champion.
Okay. Now, this is the finale of this show for this year. The plan is for February to pick up, and we'll do rankings and everything again then. Now, I'll still be talking baseball on the Sports Stove podcast every Wednesday night through the rest of the season. My dad joins me for that. So we'll still be covering baseball, of course, but with this being a fantasy baseball show, this is the finale of the program. That being said, neither one of us, Kevin, end our content when fantasy baseball ends. So tell the fine folks what they can be expecting from you over the next several weeks.
Okay, well, almost immediately, even though the season's ending today, it's never too early to look ahead to 2024. I will have an article coming out this week of look ahead, okay? Players in 2024 who will rise in the draft, players who have fallen. And so just something to keep your eyes on when as next season approaches, because there are several players, that we could talk about. I could probably write 16 articles on that who have fallen and risen.
Yeah.
So, but that'll be coming out this week. And I believe that tomorrow at 8 Eastern, there's a baseball show that's going to focus on the playoffs. And I'll be a part of that. That's a Belly Up sponsored show. And expect some more information to come out about that. And so we'll look out for that. And then after that, I'll just play pretty much, I'm your designated writer. Whatever I happen to be interested in, I will write about it. And we'll just have to see where that comes to.
And guest star. You'll be guest starring on, I'm sure, several shows all over the.
I'm sure. And of course, as Chase mentioned, him and I do a show every Sunday at 10 Central, 11 East, and talk about, who to start, who maybe not to start. And we give a preview of that day's action. So you definitely want to take a look at that and before you set your lineups.
Yeah.
On Sunday.
So with the Sunday show coming to an end for this season, I will still be on the air Monday nights at 8 o'clock and Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. Monday nights is the local hour presented by Righteous Felon Jerky, who partnered with the local hour. So we've got our own code and everything now. And really excited about that partnership. But anyways, that's Monday night at 8. We talk Eastern Kentucky sports right now, heavy football. And Ryan Jackson, defensive lineman for EKU, co-host that show with me. And tomorrow night, we're talking with Frank Lee, a linebacker who's had 2 sacks each of the last 2 weeks.
Which they've won the last 2 weeks, right?
They have won. They won a good one this past weekend against North Alabama, and they won a close one 2 weeks ago against SEMO. So, yeah, very, very close stuff. But the plan is to get some volleyball on, EKU volleyball on a 13-game win streak. So we're going to try to get one of the players on there as well. So it's a fun time. If you like sports, I really do think it's worth the listen.
Absolutely.
EKU, you may not care about, but we get some insight from the athletes.
Yeah, if you don't like sports, then shame on you, first of all.
Why are you watching this show?
Why are you? We're glad you're watching.
Yes.
But if you don't like sports, you might want to take an evaluation of your priorities.
Definitely. My Wednesday night show, my dad joins me. We talk NFL, college
Which
football.
Is always entertaining and informative.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have a good time with it. And we'll be back Wednesday night at 8 o'clock as well. My writing has pretty much come to an end outside of EKU stuff. I had high expectations to do a lot more writing. The time was just not there. So I'll still write EKU articles. We try to preview and recap games. Could not recap this week because I couldn't watch the game. So I would have just been repeating what someone else had to say. So we didn't write one this week, but nonetheless, you can tune in on Belly Up Sports for that as well. I do want to remind people, Righteous Felon, listen, if you listen to my other shows, I'll be pushing my personal code, but we appreciate the support of Belly Up, of course, throughout this program. In the past, me and Kevin did the Belly Up Fantasy Baseball Live. And Belly Up gave us the go-ahead and the permission to kind of transition it over to the Sports Stove brand. And we appreciate their support. So if you go to righteousfelon.com, you're going to find all kinds of jerky flavors. It's great stuff. Use the code Belly Up. And
remember, lemon pepper.
This week.
All right.
Yes. Well, it's called Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela.
Okay. That might be something new I have to check out.
Yeah. But go check it out. Belly Up will give you 15% off. Use that code. My personal code, if you want it, come listen to us Monday night or Wednesday night. We'll give it to you then as well. But like I said, listen, Belly Up Fantasy Sports has been with us. We are a part of them. But they've been so supportive of this program. Belly Up as a whole have been very supportive of this program. Dan Mader, who runs the fantasy side of things, Mike Brown, and Blaine. Sorry. Yeah, and Blaine run I blanked there for a second. Run Belly Up Sports, though, and we're so appreciative of their support. Chase and all the guys in the fantasy league, we appreciate them as well, and letting us kind of just put a microscope on our league and let us make fun of them and ourselves at the same time.
That's
so
right.
we appreciate that as well. And then Kevin has been faithful, man. He's been here every week, even on weeks where he came straight in from work and jumped on as well. And so, Kevin, I always appreciate, and I hope that you know that. I hope that you understand that I'm appreciative of you and the effort and the work that you put in, because you don't come in half-hearted. You always put in the work and the research as well. And of course, we got to say thank you to your cat, who makes guest appearances occasionally, and your wife, who's a faithful listener of this program.
Not paying attention.
Yeah.
That's right. She's listening as we speak this very second. So.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you, Vince, and all you bring to the table. And I know we sometimes rib each other a little bit, and but that's to be expected. And you give me something that I could look forward to. I know we're going to have, something to engage upon and talk about, and you come ready, and we just put out the information, and hopefully we heard Chase, and he made use of it and won a league championship. So it's nice to know that, when we put out some information, people are actually listening to it. So
that's exactly right. And that's the last people we got to thank is the listeners, everyone who tuned in, whether it was live on YouTube or Belly Up Fantasy Facebook, or whether it was later on Spotify or Apple or wherever they get your podcasts. We do appreciate your listening to our program. Those who have interacted with us, we've had some comments on YouTube, and different places. So we appreciate all those that listen. We at this point in our lives, me and Kevin do not make a living doing this, but we appreciate the support of those who listen and tune in each week as well. Kevin, final thoughts before we close out the program.
Well, final thoughts. It's been fun. And I look forward already to next season. And as you mentioned, the playoffs are something to look forward to. And people, they want to eat, sleep, and drink football. But baseball is not to be denied. I think we got some real interesting games, some series that are coming up that will keep us entertained for at least another month or so.
Yeah.
So don't turn your back on baseball. It will deliver.
I agree. And I'll just close with this. I may have finished second place, but at least it's not third. But
let me mention just one thing is in the other league that I'm in, I won the championship.
There you go.
In that league, and I took down the guy who lost one game all season long.
Awesome.
He had 2 losses, and both of them were to me.
There you go.
So he dominated like nobody's business. Like, the 2001 Seattle Mariners and 116 games. Then got into the championship series against the Yankees and went down.
Yep.
So that's what happened to this guy. I took him down decisively.
That feels good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not as nearly as fun as if I was taking you down decisively, but I guess I have to take what I can get.
Take what you can get. He's Kevin Wilson. You can find him on Twitter or X at Kevin62, WILSEA. I'm Vince Stover. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Sports Stove. You can always find us on Belly Up Sports and Belly Up Fantasy Sports as well. We greatly appreciate you tuning in throughout this season. Congrats to all you winners and good luck to
Definitely
all
congrats,
you
because if you
non-winners.
won a league championship, you have something to be, legitimately proud about, because you stuck with it all season.
Especially baseball, right?
Especially baseball, where
season.
as Chase learned, you have to pay attention more to fantasy baseball than all the other ones put together. Probably, maybe the NBA. No, because the NBA don't play every day.
That's right.
But baseball plays every day, and you have to pay attention to it every day. So if you won or even made the playoffs, go ahead and give yourself a pat on the back.
That's right. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, we'll see you around the sports stove.